The Swahili people live along the eastern coast of Africa, specifically in Tanzania, Kenya, and Mozambique, in an area that is now known as the Swahili Coast but was previously called Azania from the 7th to the 14th century. Their settlements are some of the oldest in the continent, with Dar es Salaam, Mombasa and Malindi being the largest cities inhabited by them. Their native language, which also goes by that name too, but is referred to as Kiswahili locally, is a Bantu language that is one of the most spoken in the continent, though not many people know about the original speakers of the language before it spread to the hinterlands of East Africa. The Swahili culture, just like the language itself, has a huge Arabic influence, as the word Swahili suitably means coast in Arabic. The people initially belonged to the Bantu language group who had migrated from the interior of the continent and settled in the southeastern part, where they traded with people from other continents, particularly Asia. The coast was also visited by Europeans who mainly came as explorers and later as missionaries and colonialists. Their small towns were established in as early as the beginning of the first millennium, where they evolved steadily as the trading activities, mainly with Arab, Persian, Indian, and Chinese merchants increased, which led to the prosperity of the little villages into what would later come to be known as the Swahili City States. During the 8th century, Arab Muslim traders came to the region and established permanent settlements, as the Persians, who were known as the Shirazi, arrived much later, in the 12th century. As the Arabs came, they brought with them the Islamic religion and converted the people, who have been deeply rooted in the religion up to date. However, before the arrival of Islam, the Swahili worshipped according to the traditions of their ancestors. This is the period that many people claim was the origin of the Swahili people. As migrants from the Arabian Peninsula, Persia, and India were settling on the eastern coast of Africa, they heavily intermarried with the Bantu people, who were the original inhabitants of the Swahili towns. This culture has not faded away, as families from the Swahili coast frequently intermarry with families in Arabia, especially Yemen and Oman. The long period of interaction between the Arab migrants and the Bantu people led to the emergence of the Swahili language, which in turn is a mixture of many languages, particularly the African tongues of the locals, as the syntax and word structure of the language is related to Bantu, which is one of the most widespread root languages in Central Africa and also incorporates many loanwords borrowed from Arabic, with some sources citing as high as 40%. The Swahili culture is very diverse as a consequence of its many foreign influences, in addition to the aspects of the original Bantu inhabitants. The Swahili culture is practiced on the coast of Kenya, Tanzania, southern Somalia, and the islands of Zanzibar and Comoros, and despite foreign influence, the culture has preserved some distinctly African traits. Starting with the clothing, the Swahili people revere the conga, which plays a meaningful role in the cultural identity of women in the Great Lakes region, where they have been part of the traditional dress for centuries. The Swahili congas are often denoted with proverbs written in the language, as women often use them to convey personal messages to their friends, husbands, and families. Before the arrival of the Arabs, the Swahili people used a matriarchal system where women would own houses and children belonged to their mother and not father, although men would make major decisions for the family and provided security to the entire community. Due to Arabian influence, things changed a bit and they also adopted kanzu for the men and buibui for the ladies. The buibui is a black fabric that is mostly associated with the Muslim religion and are simple, without decorations, and not too tight on the body. The women also don the dera, which is thought to have originated from Somalia and found its way into the coastal regions of East Africa, though it has lately penetrated inside the interior of the continent. Swahili marriages were traditionally arranged to take place as a way to continue a family's lineage, and a bride price was paid to the girl's family. The marriages take around 3 to 4 months to plan, during which both families hold different ceremonies. On the wedding day, a grand celebration is held where food and music are offered in plenty. Polygamy is common in Swahili society, and divorce and remarriage are also done, since it is allowed by the Islam religion. The Swahili foods are very alluring, from the irresistible aroma to the delicious taste, due to the perfect variety of spices included in the dishes. One of the most common Swahili food is rice cooked with coconut milk, which has traditionally been a staple food for the community. Other dishes like the Swahili cuisine also exhibit foreign influences, specifically from Indian cultures, as it is very flavorsome and makes heavy use of Indian spices and indigenous African ingredients. Vegetables are often served to accompany the Swahili cuisine, with the main sources of protein being fish, chicken, and goat. During celebrations, food is served in big aluminium plates, known as siniya, for communal eating. Since the Islamic religion prohibits the consumption of pork and alcohol, they are therefore forbidden in the Swahili community. Another important cultural aspect of the Swahili people is their creative use of arts and crafts. For centuries, they have been known for their incredible expertise in wood carving and fashioning works of art out of metals like gold and silver. The Swahili are also good musicians and poets. The most common musical genre of these coastal people is taarab, which is sung in the Swahili language. The songs can be both religious and secular and are used in important ceremonies like weddings or other religious events. During joyous ceremonies like weddings, people celebrate happily using music and dancing the day or night away. The Swahili architecture, which adorns the eastern and southeastern coasts of Africa, is in many ways an extension of mainland African traditions, though the design of a great number of the buildings is heavily influenced by Arabian architecture. A defining element of Swahili architecture is the widespread use of limestone as a crucial building material, with prominent features that include elegantly curved doors and beautifully styled balconies. The lintel of the door would bear carved inscriptions in Arabic, which was mostly a quote from the Quran or information regarding the owner of the house. Most vintage palaces and mansions exist at the Swahili coasts of Kenya and Tanzania and date to many centuries ago. The towns are organized into sections divided by walls, and the mosque would represent the center of each neighborhood, from which the distinctively narrow main streets run to the houses. The Periplus of Erythraean Sea, which is a document of unparalleled importance for the early history of the East African coast that was written in the 2nd century by a Greek philosopher, solidifies this and goes further to state that merchants visiting the East African coast, at that time from southern Arabia, used to speak with the natives in their local language before Swahili language was born and ended up intermarrying with them. Every year, the Swahili people in Kenya celebrate the Lamu Cultural Festival to commemorate the rich culture and traditions of the communities inhabiting the coastal region, while the governments of the East African countries preserve the culture and history of the communities on various monuments and museums as they continue to fascinate and inspire people from all walks of the world.